Hi there, it's Anne from Music Discoveries. Today's video is all about music notation clues, the kind of clues that I like to include in my sheet music to help give you a little bit more learning support as you learn my pieces. Let me show you what they are. First of all, let's talk about brackets. Now, as a harpist, you know that if you see a bracket, that means that you need to place that group of fingers on the strings all at the same time as a group. What I like to do with my brackets is you'll see that they're angled. So if the contour of the melody is rising or moving upward, then I'm going to angle my bracket upward as well. And then when the melody changes direction, the bracket changes direction. And this is to encourage you to train your eye to follow the contour of the melody, which is going to improve your sight reading skills. Next, let's talk about fingering and bracket placement. Maybe you've noticed that in my music, when the right hand plays, I always place fingering and brackets above the notes. And when left hand plays, I will always place fingering and brackets below the notes. And this is to help you navigate and figure out which hand is playing sometimes, but it also means that there's that little extra room in between the treble and bass clefs, so you can write in, not fingering, you can write in counting or dynamics or other special secret notes that you might need to write in the score. So it cleans up the score a little bit. Next, let's talk about stems. Now, you've probably noticed that on music notes, stems will either go up or they'll go down. And by the way, if the stem is going up, it will always go up on the right side and down on the left side. Now, there is a default rule that happens probably 90% of the time. I'm just making up that number, but most of the time the default stem rule is in place. And that rule is the stem needs to point in the direction that covers most of the staff lines. And that's just to keep things looking neat and tidy. If your note happens to be on the middle line, then the stem can point in either direction, or it will go in the direction that most of the other notes are going. But the default rule is that the stem needs to point in the direction that covers the most staff lines. Now, there are exceptions to that rule, and that usually happens when something unusual is happening with the clefs. So let's talk about treble clef and bass clef for a minute, and then we'll talk about that stems exception. So remember that when you see a treble clef, many people think that means right hand playing, but that's not really true. Treble clef means that you're playing the higher range of the harp or piano, and the bass clef is used for the lower pitches. And so most of the time, the right hand is playing in the treble clef and the left hand is playing in the bass clef. So when the hands are playing in this way, you will most likely see those default stem rules in action. But sometimes both hands may be playing on the high end of the harp, or even both hands in the lower end of the harp. Let's say for today, let's say that the left hand is moving up into that treble range with the right hand. So there are a couple ways that we can deal with that. So one way is for the top staff to be treble clef, right hand as usual, and then the lower staff, the left hand staff, is also treble clef, reading in that higher range. And when the music is written in that way, we're going to follow the default stem rules. Usually when I'm writing for 19 strings, when a very small harp, I will use that configuration with 2 treble clefs. Another solution, which I also use, is I'll have both hands share the top staff in the treble clef. And I'll do that especially if the left hand is only up in that high range temporarily. So if the left hand is kind of bouncing back and forth or crossing over, then I'll let that lower staff continue to be a bass clef for the left hand. And then when the left hand moves up high, I'll get it to share the top staff with the right hand. Now, if you do that, then how on earth do you tell whether to play with the right hand or left hand? So that's where you can use stems to help you figure out which hand to play. So in those situations, I point stems up for the right hand playing and stems down for the left hand playing. So I'm breaking the default rule to help you visually figure out whether to play with right hand or left hand. And here's an example. This one is from one of my pieces called Sunlight Through the Trees. And so you can see that I've used stem direction. I've broken the default rules. So that stems down will be left hand, stems up, right hand. And notice that additional support that I gave by writing an LH to give you a further clue that left hand is playing. Notice the placement of my fingering and brackets above the notes for right hand and below the notes for left hand. So that's how I navigate that section. And then later in the piece, the left hand dips back into the bass clef and the lower staff. So I hope that this was interesting and helpful to you. I hope it helped you recognize some of those clues that I'm using in my scores to help you figure out how to play my music more quickly and easily. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next video.